The truth never left the room. It waited. Welcome to Wolfe's Casebook. I am your host, Enigma. Share your location in the comments. I always enjoy reading them. Into the mystery. If you live in a brownstone where the front door is treated like the gate of a monastery, you learn the difference between a ring that belongs and one that doesn't. Our bell has a way of sounding as if it's been trained. Most people, even the ones who ought to know better, use it once and then wait like they've been informed that impatience is a misdemeanor. This one, at 11:45 on a Wednesday, came in 2 sharp jabs, close together, the second one with a petulant insistence that suggested the finger on the button had money behind it and thought the world moved at retail speed. I was at my desk in the front room, doing the glamorous part of the detective trade, scanning receipts and trying to remember whether I had promised to pay Saul Panzer for something or merely intended to. Up in the plant rooms, Nero Wolfe was with his orchids, as he always was at that hour, with Theodore Horstman hovering nearby like a wary parent at a swimming pool. Fritz Brenner was in the kitchen, finishing the last rites over lunch. The scent drifted up the hall, something with butter and discipline, and that's how you knew the day was still intact. Then the bell rang again, just once, as if someone had decided to try manners as an experiment. I stood up, because I'm the only one in that house with a job description that includes walking. I crossed the hallway, opened the door, and got a look at a woman who was dressed like a board meeting and stood like a verdict. She was in her late 30s, maybe 40 if the week had been rough, with dark hair pulled back tight enough to make an argument. Her coat was a soft gray that probably cost more than my suit, and her gloved hands held a slim leather folder like it was a weapon she could use without leaving fingerprints. Her eyes went past me into the hall as if she'd been told the building contained either salvation or disgrace. "Goodwin," she said. "That's what the mail says. I'm Margot Vale." She didn't offer her hand. Her gloves stayed on. "I have an appointment." That was interesting because we didn't. Wolfe's schedule is carved in basalt. People don't add themselves to it with confidence. They get added by accident, catastrophe, or my say-so. I hadn't said so. "You've got the address right," I told her. "The appointment part depends." She exhaled, controlled and annoyed. "I spoke to Mr. Horstman on the telephone. He said that if you rang at noon, you might be received." I finished for her. "That's not an appointment. That's Theodore being polite at gunpoint." A muscle twitched near her left cheek. She wasn't used to being spoken to like a human being. "It's important," she said. "Everybody says that. If importance were currency, I could have retired to Florida and bought my own brownstone just to refuse people." "Come in," I said, stepping back. "I can at least keep you from freezing to death on the stoop. If you do freeze to death, Mr. Wolfe will charge for the inconvenience." She moved inside with brisk efficiency, scanning the hall like she expected a trap door. I shut the door and took her coat. She hesitated. People always hesitate, as if handing their coat to a stranger in that hallway is the first step in a confidence game, but she gave it up and stood in the foyer, looking faintly offended that the place didn't have a receptionist and a water cooler. "Mr. Wolfe is occupied," I said. "He'll be down when he's ready. I'm Archie Goodwin. I do the talking, the walking, and occasionally the thinking out loud so Mr. Wolfe can hear it." Her mouth tightened. "Charming. I've been called worse by kinder people." I led her into the office. Wolfe's red-leathered chair sat behind the big desk like a throne waiting for the king to return from the temple. His bookshelves flanked it, dense and orderly, and the yellow-shaded lamp stood on the desk like a small sun that had agreed to work indoors. No, she didn't sit until I pointed to the red chair for visitors. When she did, she perched on the edge as if upholstery might be contagious. "Before Mr. Wolfe descends," I said, taking my own chair behind my desk, "you can tell me why you're here. If it's a divorce, a blackmailer, or a missing poodle, I can save you the trouble." Her eyes flicked to the door, then back. "It's not that." "Good. That leaves the other 99% of human misery. She opened the folder. Inside were papers, neatly arranged, clipped, and indexed the way a person indexes the things she doesn't want to talk about. "My company is being extorted," she said. That one at least had some weight. Extortion doesn't happen unless somebody has leverage, and leverage usually means dirt, money, or fear. Sometimes all three if the person with leverage is ambitious. "What company?" I asked. "Vale and Pemberton Imports." I knew the name, not because I haunt the ports, but because Fritz reads the food pages like scripture, and Wolfe has opinions on olive oil that would start a war in the Mediterranean. Vale and Pemberton was the sort of place that sold fancy ingredients to fancy people, including restaurants that had waiters who looked down on you for pronouncing prosciutto wrong. "And you're," I prompted. "Chief Operations Officer." She said it as if it should have ended the conversation. "Okay. Who's extorting you and why bring it to us?" "Because," she said, and her controls slipped just enough to show teeth under it, "he has chosen to involve your household." That was new. "Involve us how?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "When people say a thing like that, you don't want to react like you're scared. So you want them to keep talking." She slid a single sheet across the desk toward me. It was folded once, creased neatly, and it smelled faintly of cloves. I unfolded it and read, "Mr. Wolfe, you appreciate fine arrangements. So do I. If Mrs. Vale doesn't deliver what I require by Friday, you will find that your arrangements, culinary and botanical, will become less satisfactory. Start with the kitchen." A friend indoors. The paper was heavy, the kind you buy when you want your handwriting to look like it belongs to your bank account. The note was typed, no signature, no telling marks. The last line was the kind of flourish that tries too hard. I looked up at her. "That's melodramatic," I said. "Also vague. People who threaten Mr. Wolfe usually try to be more specific. They're proud." Her nostrils flared. "We received a similar letter. And a phone call." "From a man?" "A man." She said it carefully, like admitting a man existed was an inconvenience. "What does he require?" She hesitated. "Miss Vale," I said, "if you came here to protect your dignity, you picked the wrong address. This place eats dignity for breakfast and asks for seconds." Her lips flattened. Then she spoke in a low, controlled voice. "He wants an internal document, a ledger." "Accounting?" "Procurement," she said, and her eyes held mine. "Not just the totals, the suppliers, the terms, the arrangements." Ah, that kind of ledger. In businesses like hers, arrangements can mean an innocent deal or a dirty one, and the difference often depends on who's asking. "When did you lose it?" I asked. "It wasn't lost. It was taken." "From where?" "My office." She lifted her chin. "Locked," too alarmed. "And you didn't call the police?" Her eyes sharpened. "Of course not. If the police enter my office, the story ends up in a courtroom or a newspaper. Either way, the company bleeds." That was honest, at least. "So you came to Wolfe," I said. "You want him to find your missing ledger and put the fear of God into a thief. I want him to stop this before it damages—" She caught herself. "Before it damages everything." I tapped the note against the desk, and he involved our household by threatening the kitchen. Yes. The kitchen is sacred in that house. Fritz reigns there with gentle tyranny, and Wolfe's appetite is not merely a preference. It's an institution. Threatening it is like threatening the Constitution. You don't do it unless you want a reaction. I could feel the case taking shape in the air, and it wasn't a pleasant shape. "Did you show this to Horstman?" I asked. I told him what the letter contained. He refused to discuss it. A flicker of irritation crossed her face. He said Mr. Wolfe would decide whether to see me. That sounded like Theodore. If Theodore had been offered a bribe to keep Wolfe away from trouble, he would have accepted the bribe and still brought Wolfe the trouble, just so he could feel morally superior while doing it. I leaned back. Okay, who besides you would have access to this procurement ledger? I'm not going to list my employees like suspects, she said. Then you're going to waste your money, I told her. And since you haven't even started paying it yet, that's impressive. Her jaw tightened again. Look, I said, you came to a man who solves problems by sitting in a chair. And that works because he gets the right information and he uses it like a scalpel. If you hand him a pillow instead, he'll send you away. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she opened the folder again and drew out another sheet. This, she said, is a list of 4 people. Senior, trusted, close enough to know what they shouldn't know. She didn't slide it to me yet. She held it with 2 fingers, as if it offended her to touch it. Read me the names, I said. She did. Calvin Pemberton, she said. My partner. I nodded. The Pemberton in the sign. Lila Sloan, she continued. My legal counsel. Internal or external? External, she said, clipped. But familiar. Familiar is a dangerous word. Her eyes flashed at that, but she kept going. Evan Rook, she said. Our head of logistics. Ports and warehouses, I murmured. Lots of keys. And Tessa Quill, she finished. Our buyer, the person who negotiates with suppliers. I whistled softly. That's a nice little circle. Partner, lawyer, logistics, buyer. You could write a tragedy with that cast. I don't want a tragedy, she snapped. I want this ended. Everybody wants that, I said. Most of them are disappointed. Footsteps in the hall saved her from replying. Heavy ones, deliberate, the sound of a man who never hurries because the world can wait. Nero Wolfe appeared in the doorway, filling it the way a large piece of furniture fills space. Not by moving aggressively, but by asserting its presence. He wore his brown suit as always, as in his face was composed in the expression I'd learned to interpret as mild distaste at the necessity of humanity. He looked at our visitor for a fraction of a second, then at me. Archie, he said, you have permitted a stranger into my office. Yes, sir, I said. I thought you'd want to know before she started ringing the bell in Morse code. His eyes returned to Margot Vale. Madam, she stood. Mr. Wolfe. He didn't offer his hand either. Wolfe can be courteous in a way that makes you feel smaller for accepting it. You have disturbed my routine, Wolfe said. For that, you must present justification. Margot Vale's shoulders stiffened. I believe I have. Wolfe's gaze fell to the note on my desk. He moved no farther into the room, but his eyes did what his legs did not. They traveled, absorbed, evaluated. What is that? He asked, but as if he suspected it might be contagious. A letter, I said, threatening your arrangements, culinary and botanical, signed A Friend Indoors. Wolfe's eyelids lowered slightly, a gesture that in him meant either amusement or the first stirrings of wrath. With Wolfe, it's sometimes hard to tell because both are quiet. He came fully into the office and sat in his chair behind the desk, settling into it like a judge resuming court. He did not touch the letter. He did not have to. His attention fixed on Margot Vale with the steady pressure of a thumb on a bruise. You are Miss Vale, he said, and you are here because you fear loss. Her chin lifted. I'm here because someone is trying to force me to... Do not explain, Wolfe said, cutting her off like a sentence he disliked. Mr. Goodwin has explained sufficiently. You possess a company. A ledger has been stolen. You are being coerced, and... His voice cooled. Someone has been rash enough to imply that my household is a convenient lever. He paused, and in that pause the room seemed to contract. I do not like levers, Wolfe said. They are mechanical. Crude. Margot Vale swallowed. Then you'll help me. Wolfe regarded her. Perhaps it is possible that I shall help you in order to help myself. That's... Her brows drew together. Wolfe's mouth turned faintly. I do not act from altruism, madam. I act from appetite. Sometimes the two coincide. I watched her absorb that. People come to Wolfe expecting a detective. They find a mind with tastes, and the tastes are non-negotiable. Wolfe lifted his eyes to me. Archie. Fetch Mr. Brenner. For lunch? I said. No. Wolfe's voice sharpened. For counsel. That did it. As when Wolfe calls Fritz for counsel in the office, it means the kitchen has been mentioned in a way that violates the natural order. I stood. Yes, sir. As I left, I heard Wolfe speak again, calm and dangerous. Miss Vale, he said, you will tell me everything, not what you wish were true, not what you can admit without pain, everything, because someone has claimed to be indoors. He let the words hang. And, Wolfe added, if that is accurate, then the sanctity of my home has already been assaulted. I stepped into the hall with a tight feeling in my chest, the kind you get when you know a case has just walked into your house wearing gloves. Upstairs, the orchids waited, indifferent. Downstairs, the kitchen simmered, innocent. And in the middle of it, in Wolfe's office, a stranger's threat sat on my desk smelling faintly of cloves, like a warning that had learned our address by heart. Fritz came in wiping his hands on a towel, his expression polite but alert, the way it gets when the kitchen is mentioned in the same sentence as danger. He stopped just inside the office, took in Margot Vale, the open folder, and the note on my desk without anyone pointing it out. Yes, Mr. Wolfe, he said. Wolfe inclined his head a fraction. Fritz, this woman informs us, indirectly, that an unnamed individual has threatened interference with your domain. Fritz's eyebrows rose, just enough to be dignified. Interference how, sir? Wolfe nodded toward the letter. Fritz crossed the room, read it once, and handed it back to me. His mouth did not change shape, but something behind his eyes did. That is nonsense, Fritz said calmly. No one interferes with my kitchen. Precisely, Wolfe said. Yet the claim has been made. Fritz looked at Margot Vale. Madame, do you cook? No, she said stiffly. That is unfortunate, Fritz replied. If you did, you would know this is a serious accusation. Wolfe waved him away with 2 fingers. Thank you, Fritz. That will be all, for now. Fritz inclined his head again and left, but the door clicked shut with slightly more emphasis than usual. The sanctity of the kitchen had been formally notified. Wolfe turned his full attention back to Margot Vale. You will proceed, he said, from the beginning. Mr. Goodwin will listen. I will evaluate. Do not omit. Do not embellish. She drew a breath, long and controlled, like a swimmer preparing for cold water. 3 weeks ago, she said, I received a phone call at my office. The man knew details, supplier contracts, shipment dates that are not public. He told me that a procurement ledger had been copied. He did not say how. He said if I wanted it to remain private, I would cooperate. Cooperate how? Wolfe asked. By delivering a revised version, she said. One that reassigns responsibility, that places certain decisions, and certain benefits, on someone else. I felt that one land. A fall guy, I said. Her eyes flicked to me, then back to Wolfe. A partner, she said, or an employee. Anyone but me. Wolfe's fingers steepled. And you declined? Yes. Why? She hesitated, then spoke with controlled heat. Because the ledger isn't criminal. It's embarrassing. It documents favors, accelerated payments, exclusive access. It would ruin reputations, not indictments. Yours included, Wolfe said. Yes, she said flatly. And yet, Wolfe continued, you declined to protect yourself by sacrificing another. Her jaw set. I built that company. I will not survive it by destroying it. Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. An interesting distinction, he said. Continue. 2 days later, she said. The ledger was gone. No forced entry, no alarm, only the file missing. That was when I knew the threat was real. And the letter? Wolfe asked. Yesterday morning, she said. Delivered by hand. No stamp. Inside your building? I asked. She nodded. Slipped under my office door. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Which implies access. Yes. And so you came here, Wolfe said. Not because you admire my intellect, but because you fear my kitchen. Her lips tightened. Because he invoked you, and I don't know how or why, but if he thinks threatening you will move me, it will, Wolfe said, but not as he intends. He shifted slightly in his chair, the movement small but decisive. You have named 4 individuals with access. One of them is the friend indoors, or is assisting him. She stiffened. You don't know that. I know it is statistically likely, Wolfe replied, and tactically efficient. He turned to me. Archie. Yes, sir. You will begin with Mr. Calvin Pemberton. Partner first, I said. Any reason? Yes, Wolfe said. He has the most to lose and the most to gain. That combination produces either paralysis or audacity. Both are informative. He looked back at Margot Vale. You will remain available. You will not warn, consult, or conspire. If you do, I will terminate my interest. She straightened. No, you haven't agreed yet. Wolfe's mouth curved slightly. On the contrary, I've already been offended. That, for Wolfe, was consent. I stood, already reaching for my coat. Where can I find Mr. Pemberton? She gave me an address in Midtown, a building with glass and confidence. He'll be there until 6. Good, I said. I'll try not to interrupt anything vital, like a martini. As I reached the door, Wolfe spoke again. Archie. I turned. Observe, he said. Do not accuse. Do not promise. Bring me inconsistencies. Yes, sir. Outside, the city had decided to behave like winter after all. I walked, thinking. 4 suspects, 1 stolen ledger, and a threat aimed not at a woman or company, but at a household that runs on ritual. Whoever our friend indoors was, he'd done his homework, and possibly his cooking. And Pemberton's office was all angles and muted colors, the kind of place designed to make you feel underdressed no matter what you wore. He was tall, handsome in a practiced way, with hair that suggested discipline and mirrors. Archie Goodwin, I said after introductions. I work for Nero Wolfe. His eyes flickered. Just a flicker. Enough. I know who he is, Pemberton said. What does he want? Information, I said, which you may or may not have. He smiled thinly. About what? About a ledger, I said. Procurement, gone missing. The smile stayed, but it got tighter. Margot should have gone to the police. She prefers discretion, I said. So does Wolfe. It's a match made in silence. Pemberton leaned back. I don't handle procurement. That's Tessa Quill's department. Sure, I said. But partners tend to know where the bodies are buried, even when they're only reputationally deceased. He laughed. You're suggesting I'd extort my own company? I'm suggesting nothing, I said. I'm listening. He watched me for a moment. You should talk to the lawyer, he said finally. Lila Sloan. She knows where all the paper is buried. Interesting phrasing, I said. Buried paper tends to smell when it's dug up. His eyes hardened. I've told you what I know. I stood. Then you won't mind if I verify it. He didn't reply. By the time I left, I had a note in my pocket and a suspicion in my head. Pemberton had been too quick to redirect, too eager to move the spotlight. Back at the brownstone that evening, Wolfe listened without comment as I reported. He did not interrupt. He did not nod. When I finished, he closed his eyes. As Mr. Pemberton is not our man, he said at last. Because? I asked. Because he's afraid of exposure, not control. Wolfe replied. The extorter seeks orchestration. I frowned. Then who? Wolfe opened his eyes. Someone who moves quietly, someone who understands access. The buyer, I said. Or logistics. Or counsel, Wolfe said softly. A lawyer understands leverage. He leaned back. Tomorrow, Archie, you will speak to Ms. Quill. But tonight? He paused, and for the first time all day, his expression sharpened. Tonight, Wolfe said, we will inventory the kitchen. That was when I knew the case had crossed a line. Wolfe doesn't inventory the kitchen the way a normal man would. He does not count cans or peer into drawers. He summons Fritz, seats himself at the table like a visiting magistrate, and listens. That I leaned against the counter while Fritz opened cupboards, lifted lids, and spoke in the measured, reverent tone he usually reserves for explaining sources. Wolfe's eyes stayed half-lidded, his hands folded on his stomach, absorbing everything without appearing to look at anything. The spices are arranged as always, Fritz said, alphabetical by origin. The paprika from Szeged is untouched. The saffron... He paused, frowning slightly. Has been handled. That snapped my attention up. Handled how? Fritz lifted the small glass jar, held it to the light. The seal was loosened and replaced. Carelessly. I would not do this. Wolfe opened his eyes fully. When did you last open it? Yesterday morning, Fritz said. Before lunch. It was correct then. Who has access to this room? Wolfe asked. Fritz looked offended but answered. You, Mr. Goodwin, Theodore, myself, no one else. Wolfe's gaze slid to me. And you, Archie? Didn't touch it, I said. I don't even like saffron. It tastes like expense. Fritz replaced the jar with care. Nothing is missing, he said, but something was tested. Wolfe nodded once. That is sufficient. It was enough because it wasn't theft. It was reconnaissance. Somebody had wanted to know if they could enter, disturb, and leave without consequence. Somebody had proven they could. Wolfe dismissed Fritz, who left with visible restraint, and then looked at me. Our friend indoors has been inside, he said calmly, or has employed someone who has. Which narrows the field, I said, unless Theodore's running a side hustle in extortion. Mr. Horstman's sins are many, Wolfe said dryly, but inelegant. That night passed quietly, none which in that house is never reassuring. I slept lightly, listening for sounds that didn't belong. None came. Whoever had tested the kitchen had learned what they needed. The next morning I went out early to see Tessa Quill. She worked in a converted warehouse down by the river, all exposed brick and glass offices, the kind of place that wanted you to think transparency was policy, not decor. She was younger than I expected. Early 30s, sharp eyes, sharper posture. She shook my hand firmly. Let me guess, she said. Nero Wolfe. I smiled. You're good. I'm a buyer, she said. Anticipation is the job. We sat. I did not accuse, I observed. Wolfe would have approved. She spoke quickly, efficiently about suppliers, shipping delays, currency fluctuations. She knew her world. She also knew when to stop talking. And when I mentioned the ledger, she stiffened, but only for a second. That's operations, she said. Margot's domain. And yet it tracks your negotiations, I said. She shrugged. Everything tracks something. Did you copy it? No. Did you see it recently? Yes. When? 2 weeks ago, she said. Margot asked me to clarify a margin discrepancy. That put her close enough to matter. Anyone else in the room? I asked. She hesitated. Calvin was there. Interesting. And Lila Sloane? I asked. Her mouth tightened. Lila's always around when there's paper. That made 3 people orbiting one document. Not unusual, but the way Quill said it, there was irritation there, professional resentment. As I stood to leave, she said, If someone's using that ledger to squeeze Margot, it won't be for money." "Why not?" I asked. Because money's small," she said. "Control isn't." Back at the brownstone, Wolfe listened again, eyes closed. When I finished, he opened them. "Ms. Quill is not our extorter," he said. "She is too visible. She trades in leverage openly." "Then logistics?" I asked. "Evan Rook?" "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "But first," he reached for the phone. "We will invite counsel." Lila Sloane arrived that afternoon with a smile designed to reassure juries. She was impeccably dressed, her tone warm, her eyes calculating. Wolfe let her speak. She spoke well, about confidentiality, about duty, about outrage. When she finished, Wolfe said, "Madame, you are lying." She blinked. "I beg your pardon." "You have been inside my kitchen," Wolfe said mildly. Her composure cracked, just enough. "That's absurd," she said. "I've never been here before." "And yet," Wolfe continued, "you know which spices I favor. You referenced saffron in your letter to Miss Vale." Her eyes flicked to me. I hadn't told Wolfe that. He hadn't needed me to. "That was a metaphor," she said. "No," Wolfe said. "It was familiarity." Silence fell. "You had access to the ledger," Wolfe went on. "You had motive, to realign responsibility without scandal. You had opportunity, offices, keys, trust, and you had the audacity to test my household." She stood abruptly. "This is outrageous." "Sit down," Wolfe said quietly. She did. "I will not call the police," Wolfe said. "Miss Vale will not be publicly humiliated. You will return the copied ledger and withdraw." "And if I don't?" she asked, voice tight. "Then," Wolfe said, "I will make certain your professional reputation becomes unsatisfactory." She stared at him, then laughed once, bitterly. "You think you control this?" Wolfe's eyes were cold. "I have already ended it." She left without another word. That evening, the ledger copy arrived by courier. The brownstone settled back into itself. Dinner was served. Wolfe ate in silence, satisfied. At last he said, "Ethics, Archie, are like spices. Used properly, they enhance. Used improperly, they ruin the dish." I nodded. "And some people shouldn't be allowed in the kitchen." "Precisely," Wolfe said. I poured myself a drink and listened to the house breathe again. The ledger copy arriving by courier should have ended things. In a lesser house, with a lesser man at the center of it, that would have been the tidy conclusion. Villain exposed, document returned, dignity salvaged, dinner enjoyed. Wolfe even appeared to accept it that way. He ate well, spoke little, and retired early with a book that suggested the world had resumed its proper proportions. I knew better. Cases don't end cleanly when they involve people who test kitchens instead of locks. They pause. They wait to see if you've relaxed. The next morning began normally enough. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids. Fritz hummed in the kitchen, restored to benevolent authority. Theodore answered the doorbell with his usual expression of patient disapproval at existence. I was at my desk, rereading my notes on Lila Sloane and feeling uneasy about how easily she had folded. She was too smart for that. The phone rang at 10 past 10. I answered it. "Goodwin," said Saul Panzer without preamble. "Are you sitting down?" "I always am," I said. "It's an occupational hazard." "I just had a visit," Saul said, "from a woman who wanted to hire me to follow you." That got my attention. "That's flattering. Who?" "She didn't give a name," Saul said. "Didn't need to. She wanted to know where you go, who you talk to, and whether you leave your building alone at night." I glanced toward the kitchen. "Did you take the job?" "I took the conversation," Saul said. "Then I declined." Politely. She didn't like that. "Describe her." He did. Tall, controlled, lawyerly, I didn't need the rest. Lila Sloane, I said. That was my guess, Saul replied. Which means she's not done. No, I said. She's just adjusted. I hung up and went upstairs. Wolfe was standing at the long table, peering at a Catalias cluster as if it had personally disappointed him. She tried to hire Saul, I said. Of course she did, Wolfe replied, without turning. Retreating predators often attempt reconnaissance. You already took her teeth, I said. What's left? Wolfe adjusted a leaf with surgical delicacy. Influence, he said, and resentment. Both are dangerous. He turned then, his expression thoughtful. The ledger copy returned was not the endgame. It was insurance. Against what? I asked. Against discovery of the original, Wolfe said. I frowned. The original isn't missing. No, Wolfe said, but it has been used. He came back downstairs, settled into his chair and steepled his fingers. Ms. Sloane's scheme was inelegant. She assumed pressure would produce compliance. When it did not, she retreated. But someone else benefited from the initial theft. Who? I asked. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. The one person whose name you have not sufficiently interrogated. Evan Rook, I said. Logistics. Indeed, Wolfe said. A man who moves goods without attracting notice. A man who understands access and timing. And a man whose livelihood depends on knowing when paper becomes cargo. The phone rang again as if on cue. This time it was Theodore, his voice tight. Mr. Wolfe, he said. Mr. Rook is here. Wolfe's eyebrows rose slightly. Show him in. Rook entered, looking like a man who had decided to be honest as a strategy. He was broad-shouldered, neat, with the faintly harried air of someone whose world runs on schedules that other people break. I wanted to get ahead of this, he said, before lawyers start calling. You're late, Wolfe said calmly. But proceed. Rook swallowed. I knew about the ledger copy, he said. Or not the extortion, just that Lila had it duplicated. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. And you did nothing. I moved shipments, Rook said. I don't manage ethics. No, Wolfe agreed. You manage opportunity. Rook stiffened. I didn't threaten anyone. True, Wolfe said. You did not threaten. You observed. And used what you observed, I said. Rook's jaw clenched. I leveraged information, he said. I made myself indispensable. To whom? Wolfe asked. To the company, Rook said quickly. Incorrect, Wolfe said. To Ms. Vale. Silence. You arranged delays, Wolfe continued. Subtle ones. You created dependence. When Ms. Sloane applied pressure, you ensured that compliance appeared efficient. Rook's shoulders sagged slightly. I didn't touch your kitchen. No, Wolfe said. That was Ms. Sloane's miscalculation, as she personalized the threat. You anonymized the benefit. Rook looked up. Then why am I here? Because, Wolfe said, you believed the matter concluded, and because you wished to secure your position before the consequences crystallized. Rook exhaled. What do you want? Wolfe leaned back. For you to resign quietly. For Miss Vale to regain unencumbered control, and for the ledger, both original and copy, to remain exactly where they belong. And if I refuse? Rook asked. Wolfe's eyes were steady. Then I will explain to Miss Vale how logistics can be weaponized, and she will explain it to the authorities. Rook closed his eyes briefly. You never leave this chair, he said. Do you? No, Wolfe said. I arrange the room. Rook left with his future rearranged. That afternoon, Ms. Vale returned. Wolfe told her everything, and he did not soften it. She listened, pale but composed. So it wasn't just one betrayal, she said quietly. No, Wolfe replied. It was a collaboration of convenience. She nodded once. Then it ends now. Yes, Wolfe said. It does. When she left, the house felt lighter. Dinner was elaborate. Fritz had forgiven the world. Later, Wolfe said, "The most dangerous lies are those told indoors." I raised my glass. And the smartest criminals never ring the bell twice. Wolfe allowed himself a thin smile. If that had been the end of it, Wolfe would have accepted the symmetry, and I would have slept without one eye open. But symmetry is something Wolfe creates, not something the world hands him, and the world was still fidgeting. The first sign came just after dinner, when Fritz brought coffee into the office, instead of serving it in the dining room. He set the tray down carefully, then remained standing. "Yes, Fritz?" Wolfe asked. "There was a call," Fritz said. "For you. I told them you do not take calls after dinner." "And?" "They said they would call again," Fritz replied. "They sounded pleased." That earned them my attention. People who sound pleased when denied usually believe they've already won something. "Who was it?" I asked. Fritz shook his head. "They did not say." Wolfe lifted his cup, sniffed, nodded approval, and took a sip. "Archie," he said mildly, "you will remain awake this evening." "I was planning on it," I said. "The city hasn't given me permission to relax yet." The call came at 9:30. I answered on the first ring. "Goodwin," I said. A man's voice came through, smooth and unhurried. "You've been busy." "Occupational hazard," I said. "Who's calling?" "A friend," he said. "Indoors." I felt my spine straighten. I didn't look at Wolfe, but I knew he'd gone still. "You're late," I said. "Your lawyer already folded." A soft chuckle. She improvised. "So did logistics," I said. "He's out." That was inefficient, the voice said, but instructive. I leaned back in my chair. "You want to cut to the part where you explain why you're calling my house?" A pause. Then, "Because Mr. Wolfe believes he has ended this." "And you disagree?" "Yes." I glanced at Wolfe. He gave the slightest nod. "Talk," I said. "You recovered a copy of the ledger," the voice said. "You neutralized 2 participants, but the original document remains compromised." "It's intact," I said. "It's altered," the voice replied. "But not physically. Contextually." That landed. I could see Wolfe's eyes narrow. "What context?" I asked. "The context of belief," the voice said. "Miss Vale believes she controls the narrative again. She does not." "And you do?" "I influence it," he said. "From indoors." Wolfe leaned forward. He did not speak, but the movement was decisive. I put the phone on speaker. "Then you've made a mistake," I said. "You called the wrong house." Another chuckle. "On the contrary, I called the only house that understands containment." Wolfe spoke then, his voice calm and resonant. "You are neither subtle nor clever," he said. "You are merely patient." There was a pause, longer this time. "So you are listening," the voice said. "I am always listening," Wolfe replied. "You have benefited from observation without comprehension." "That ends." "Does it?" the man asked. "You haven't identified me." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Archie." I understood. I picked up my notebook, flipped to a page I hadn't shown him yet. "You didn't threaten money," I said into the phone. "You threatened systems, kitchens, orchids, ritual. You didn't want leverage. You wanted proof of access." "And?" the voice prompted. "And the only person who benefits from continued instability," I went on, "is the one positioned to replace it." Silence. "Calvin Pemberton," Wolfe said quietly. The voice sighed. "Very good." I sat up straighter. "You let Sloane take the heat. You let Rook make himself useful, and you waited to see if Wolfe would settle." "Yes," Pemberton said. "No more pretense now." "And if he had, I would have proceeded." "Proceeded how?" Wolfe asked. "By stepping in," Pemberton said. "By stabilizing. By being the reasonable partner who restores confidence." Wolfe's expression was one of mild distaste. You attempted to manufacture chaos in order to sell order. That's business, Pemberton said. No, Wolfe replied. That is extortion refined by cowardice. Pemberton laughed softly. You won't expose me. It would destroy the company you just saved. Wolfe shook his head slightly. You misunderstand. I do not preserve institutions. I preserve boundaries. And mine? Pemberton asked. You have crossed them, Wolfe said. Repeatedly. Another pause. Then, what do you want? Wolfe leaned back. Confession, he said. In writing, full attribution, delivered tomorrow morning, or I will ensure that Miss Vale learns precisely how many of her crises originated from your patients. And if I refuse? Then, Wolfe said, though you will discover how unpleasant it is to be outed indoors. The line went dead. I exhaled slowly. That was him. Yes, Wolfe said, and now it is finished. Is it? I asked. He sounded stubborn. Wolfe smiled thinly. Stubborn men mistake endurance for immunity. The confession arrived at 8:30 the next morning, typed, signed, and exhaustive. Pemberton had underestimated one thing: Wolfe's willingness to let a company burn if it meant extinguishing a nuisance in his house. Miss Vale came later, pale but resolute. Wolfe handed her the document. This gives you options, he said. Use them judiciously. She nodded. Thank you. When she left, the house settled into its familiar hush. Wolfe returned to his orchids. Fritz planned dinner with renewed confidence. Theodore answered the bell only once when it rang. That evening, as Wolfe said, the most dangerous lies are those that wait patiently. I raised my glass. And the smartest criminals forget that some houses remember. Wolfe closed his book. Indeed. The brownstone breathed, untroubled at last. The confession changed everything and nothing, which is the way Wolfe prefers it. It changed the future of a company, the shape of a partnership, and the direction of several careers. It changed nothing inside the brownstone, which is the only ledger Wolfe truly keeps. Pemberton did not come himself. He sent the document by courier, sealed, indexed, and annotated like a man trying to prove competence in defeat. Wolfe read it once, slowly, without expression. When he finished, he passed it to me. It was thorough, too thorough, a narrative of patience and positioning, and of letting others commit the visible sins while he curated inevitability. He hadn't planned every detail, but he had planned for adaptability, which is worse. He believed time was an ally that only he knew how to use. I handed it back. He really thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. Yes, Wolfe said. That is how such men survive, briefly. Margot Vale arrived just after 10. She looked different, not relieved exactly, but aligned, as if her spine had finally decided which way to face. Wolfe gave her the confession and said nothing while she read. When she finished, she closed her eyes for a moment. So it was never about protecting me, she said quietly. No, Wolfe replied. It was about replacing you without appearing to do so. She nodded. I'll dissolve the partnership. That would be prudent, Wolfe said, but insufficient. She looked up. What do you suggest? Wolfe folded his hands. That you make the truth public enough to be unambiguous, but private enough to be survivable. Do not martyr him. Neutralize him. She considered that, then smiled faintly. You're not a businessman, she said. I am, Wolfe replied. I simply refuse to pretend otherwise. She stood, extended her hand. Wolfe did not take it but inclined his head instead. She accepted that, which told me she'd learned something useful. After she left, the house exhaled. Fritz served lunch with ceremony restored. Theodore resumed his quiet patrol of propriety. The orchids bloomed as if nothing had ever been threatened. That evening, Wolfe summoned me to the office after dinner. He sat with a book open but unread, and with the sign that his thoughts had already finished their work and were now being archived. "It is concluded," he said. "Officially," I agreed. "Unofficially, half of Manhattan will still be talking about it." "That is noise," Wolfe said. "We dealt with signal." I leaned back in my chair. "You know what still bothers me?" Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "He didn't need to test the kitchen," I said. "He could have threatened money, reputation, anything, but he went for ritual." "Why?" Wolfe closed the book. "Because ritual is identity," he said, "and identity is where power resides." He wished to see if my world could be unsettled. "And?" I prompted. Wolfe's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "It could not." I poured myself a drink. "You ever worry someone smarter will try again?" "Frequently," Wolfe said. "But intelligence without discipline is merely impatience in disguise." We sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't need filling. At last Wolfe spoke again. "Archie." "Yes, sir." "Remember this," he said. "Crimes committed indoors are not about secrecy. They are about familiarity. The criminal believes himself unseen because he feels at home." I nodded. "And that's when he forgets who owns the house." "Precisely," Wolfe said. I finished my drink, glanced around the office. The books, the chair, the order restored. Outside, the city moved on, already hunting for its next disturbance. Inside, the truth had waited patiently. And in this house, patience always loses to precision.